Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is the upper tier, and this is your match reaction and player ratings review for Aston Villa versus Manchester United. Of course, Aston Villa 2, Manchester United 2. Really, really interesting game, especially for the neutrals. And I'm sure if you're a Liverpool fan, you really enjoyed it as well as I did. But it was a weird kind of game in terms of, I mean, the lineup came out for United: no Ronaldo, no Rashford, no Martial, no Harry Maguire on the bench, and it was just a kind of a, it was kind of like the lineup that United fans had been calling out for. Um, this is what they wanted to see. They wanted Maguire dropped. They wanted players being put in there based on merit and on performance. And they kind of got what they wanted. For Villa, Dania, the new boy from Everton, he started. He's always a bright player and stuff like that. Coutinho on the bench, not necessarily fully fit yet, but ready to go if you needed 20, 30 minutes of him. Shrewd by Gerrard, obviously. But Villa came out really, really, really slow. Very, very lackluster. Weren't really getting stuck in or challenging for the ball. Gave United a lot of the ball. And that paid off with the possession that United had. Bruno Fernandes pops up with a free kick. Ball played into him, moves it forward to the just outside the edge of the box on the left hand side. Rifles in a shot. Cavani throws a leg at it, which Emi Martinez thought was offside, but Mings had played him on. Doesn't touch the ball. Ball arrives at Emi Martinez, and we get shades of Toyibi. Hits him basically nearly in the ball sack and goes through his legs. Very embarrassing for the keeper. The keeper was talking about being unsided offside to the referee. The referee was having none of it. It was checked and the goal counted. United 1-0 up. The worst start that Gerrard could have wanted. A howler from his keeper, who was being really, really good. Then United continued strong and in possession and stuff like that. And I'm sure United fans were thinking, well, this is it. This is the reset. This is what we wanted. This is the setup. This is a team now that doesn't look like Moments FC. This is a team that looks like a team that's playing together. A team that's playing for each other. Bruno Fernandes is the captain. It's all good. So Ralph today is ticking all the boxes basically. So then Villa kind of grew into the game a little bit, sort of obviously getting roasted by Gerrard somewhat, I'd say, from the sideline. Got a bit of a wake up call and they were getting a few set pieces. Buendia cropped up a one off a corner. An absolute bullet header, point blank. David De Gea with an absolute world class save. David De Gea, without a doubt, this season has been absolutely exceptional, and without him United would be at least in the bottom half of the league. He has been their player of the season again. He has been their man of the match on so many occasions, and it's ridiculous to think that that's the case for Manchester United, but it is, and that's the reality of where the club is at. So they go in at half time and it's 1-0 to Villa. I'm sure Gerrard went in there, roasted a few of those Villa players with some home truths. And remember, this is kind of, there's a bit of blood and guts to this one, because we know Gerrard, you know, the history with Liverpool and everything else, and the rivalry that was there for years, and the guff and the grief that they gave him about slipping and never winning a Premier League and all this kind of stuff, all that banter that goes on. So he'll always want to put one over on United. He'll always be up for that. And he expects his player to operate at that level that he operates at, even from the sideline. And I'll get on to him towards the end of this as well, because I want to make a point that I noticed yesterday. But then they come out in the second half, Aston Villa a little bit more brightly. I have to say also, before we get into the second half, actually, the boy Elanga I thought was really, really good. He's a shining light out of United there. Looks a proper prospect. Really good cross control. Can bang it with the left foot. His link-up play, I thought, with Tellez, I thought was really, really good. And I like the boy Tellez in that position that he plays, probably more so than Luke Shaw, because I think he's a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more athletic. And I think Luke Shaw is kind of more predictable. But we go into the second half. Just want to make that point about Elanga, because a young lad in there, and I think it's worth making the point. Go into the second half, Villa come out a little bit more sprightly. They're creating without creating, if you like. You know, they're creating a number of chances, but they don't really have that little spark of creativity that they need. And then upsets the boy Ramsey in the 77th minute. Now this is United, like 70 minutes into this game. They must have thought this is going reasonably well. We expected kind of to be turned over here. Hasn't happened since 1995, so 27 years or whatever it is going there without being turned over. All going to plan. You know, and just before Gerrard starts to get ready with his substitutions with Coutinho, and the next thing, bang, Bruno steps up in the box and rifles one into the top of the net. And it's 2-0 United. And it couldn't have come at a worse time because Gerrard was just about to make his changes. And I'm kind of thinking if those changes had happened 5 minutes before that goal, would we have had a very different result? But who knows? So 2-0 to United, and Gerrard springs the players from the bench. On comes, what was it again? On comes Coutinho. On comes House replaced Konza because Konza had an injury towards the end of the first half. You seen him towards the end; he was limping out and stuff like that. Coutinho comes on for Samson, and then Danny Ings is replaced by Chuck Wenke, and then we get the real. This is it, the magician. The stage is set. Liverpool fans are waiting with bated breath to see who this Philip Coutinho, who we cherished and loved till he went to Barcelona, is he going to be the one to put United to the sword? And he comes on, and it's like a breath of fresh air, and you just see the drop in the United team in terms of performance. The midfield just started to melt like ice cream in the summer sun, and it's an interesting dynamic really, because it shows a little bit of naivety from Ralph Ranik in terms of his understanding of the Premier League. And some interesting comments came out this week that obviously didn't help the team in terms of Ronaldo did an interview, and he says that the younger players there, when he was there in his first stint, he got lots of great advice from the senior players that were there that he took on board that helped him throughout his career. But he kind of alluded to the fact that now when he gives out advice, people just ignore him. They don't really care because, you know, they all think they're world class at this stage kind of thing. This is kind of what he was setting. And then we had Ralph Rangnick coming out talking about like he was surprised at the lower teams in the league and stuff like that. And, you know, and you're just there going, God, coming out with this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? It's not good. But Coutinho comes on anyway, brightens up Villa. Villa come alive, and boom, Ramsey pops up at the goal on 77. And all of a sudden you just see United like a snail going into their shell. And it's here we go again. And men become boys. And then up Coutinho with the assist as well there, I should say. Then he was lively all the time. Then steps up, ball comes in from the left-hand side. Coutinho on his own in the box. Simple side foot into the back of the net. 2-2. And then you see United really curling up. And like you look at United there, and you could see that midfield was wilted after 70 minutes or whatever it was. Fred was dead on his feet. Matic was dead on his feet. So they'd no midfield basically. And then after that, it was just wave after wave after wave of Villa attack. And really could have stole it. Really could have stole it 3-2 in the end. And it's a precarious position now for Man United to be in, because they're going to have a real struggle to get top four, because the teams above them, without a shadow of a doubt, Spurs and Arsenal and West Ham, are playing much better football than United. They're way more organised, much more stable and better coaching. Whereas at United at the moment, it's like they're trying to reinvent the wheel again, and they're trying to re-educate players on how football works. And you know, there's discontent coming out of there. There's players who have requested to leave and they're not being allowed to leave. You know, we have to mention Martial was asked to be in the match day squad, and he refused to be in the match day squad, which means he's trying to force him to move away. And I think United would probably be better off cutting ties with him anyway, to be honest. I mean, he's been a bit part player now for what, 3 years, 2-3 years at this stage. Really stifled his career, really. And part of that is on him. Part of that is on the club, the changing of coaches, everything else that goes on. He's been kind of just lost in the wash, basically. But yeah, a real conundrum for United at the moment. They're just kind of trying throw things all the time at the wall. They're trying to change things every single week. So nothing is really getting a chance to kind of bed in and to see, does this work? Because it's like, you're not going to change things over a week, but it's change after change after change after change. And nothing seems to be working. It's a baptism of fire for Ralph Ranik without a shadow of a doubt. He hasn't experienced this level, especially in the Premier League, at all, and it's an eye opener for him. And what's more concerning, I suppose, is for United fans, is that, like, this is the guy. Like, you can see how he's operating there. You can see his naivety in terms of the timing of his changing of the substitutions and all that kind of thing. And now we're thinking, this is the guy who's going to come upstairs and become a director of football. So this is the guy who's going to recognize what the team needs and what the supporting manager needs. Yet on the sideline, he can't recognize the two midfielders are wilting to make the changes. And I'd be really concerned about that, On the flip side of that, if you look at Gerrard, I seen a moment there yesterday with Gerrard where he gave Philip Coutinho a hug on the pitch at the end of the game. And he looked pissed off that he had only got a draw. And this is the ambition and that winning mentality within Gerrard that boils deep inside him. And not just naturally against United, he'd always want to win. But it's this kind of mentality that he's instilling in his players, that, like, a draw is like a loss. You want to win. You want to win. He wants to fly up that table. He wants to make an impact. He wants to drive up that table. He wants to try and get back in Europe. He wants to be successful. And he has a burning desire in there. And he's doing some really, really good things at Aston Villa. You can see some of the players have really stepped up from. They're really playing for him and stuff like that. But I just think a lackluster start yesterday really cost him that first goal, surrendering possession to United when they could have been more in the battle from the start. I thought the boy Alanga, I thought he gave Cash a torrid time at times. And Cash is normally a fairly solid player he'd be a go-to player for Gerrard. He's a Gerrard type player in terms of getting stuck in and stuff like that and giving you 100%. The other thing I wanted to recognise, and it's an interesting dynamic based on yesterday's football. Ralph Ranik, who is the guy who they say educated Klopp and Tuchel on the gegenpress and all this kind of stuff. But the interesting dynamic that we seen yesterday was Ralph Ranik dragged his ass a little bit on the substitutions yesterday. We seen the same with Thomas Tuchel. And we've also seen the same with Jurgen Klopp, where they just take their time in making the changes. They don't quickly recognize issues within. It's their in-game management at times can be very frustrating for a fan base that can see it on the telly. And you would think they would see it from the sideline as well. And it's a common trait between the three boys. The timing of substitutions and in-game management sometimes leaves a little to be desired. And I just thought I'd recognise that, because we know Ralph has close links with Tuchel and with Klopp. And there seems to be a kind of a little bit of a pattern there, albeit that Tuchel and Klopp have much better quality to work with. But yeah, it's a difficult one for United at the moment. Really, really struggling. They need some players in. The problem they have at the moment is they have a bloated squad, and it doesn't look like any of those players are going anytime soon. And that's a real problem when you're trying to bring players in, because it's like, what do? You know what I mean? You're trying to bring in midfielders, but you have a bloated midfield of players that don't necessarily fit your system, don't necessarily fit your squad. You've got players talking now on interviews. You've got players, talk going around that these players, some of these players are leaking information to the press. Players that are not happy that are forcing transfers. Players who have asked for transfers out, but not being granted them because the talk is that they are potentially needed for the rest of the season. So it's a mammoth task for Ralph Rangnick at the moment. And if you look at the likes of Tottenham and Arsenal and West Ham, if they kind of win some of their games in hand and stuff like that, that gap between them and United is only going to grow. Up next for United is Brentford, which is not going to be an easy game either. And I mean, most Man United fans, did you ever think you'd see the day where you'd be turning around going, right, next up is a game against Brentford? It's going to be a tough game. So every game for United now is a tough game. It's hard wearing. It's a struggle. Their game, rather than it being flowing, is very forced. There doesn't seem anything natural about it at the moment, and it's a real struggle for them at the minute. I wanted to take a look at some of the player ratings for United. I did a bit of a reference here to the Busby Babe on sbnation.com, just as a reference point. But I looked at it and I thought they were the ones who I thought were the most harsh in their ratings of the players. And they started out with David De Gea and they gave him a 5, which I thought was very, very harsh, because I would have thought David De Gea would have been one of the man of the match contenders yesterday for United. Made some really, really good saves, but did let in 2 goals. Not much he could probably do about them. But they're pinpointing his second half distribution at times led to Aston Villa's attacks. And that's why they're marking them down to a 5. Now, whether you agree or disagree, I think that's a harsh rating for him. I would have put him up more about a 6, 6.5 maybe, or 7. I thought overall, I think some of those saves he made one down low. He made the point blank one header off Buendia. And to be honest with you, only for his saves, United would have left Villa Park yesterday with no points. Diogo Dalot, they gave a 5 as well, making the point on the second half. A lot of it wasn't really his fault, but the defensive shape of the side meant that a lot of the attacks came down his side and stuff like that, and he was a little bit isolated, so they gave him a 5. Again, I thought it was harsh. I looked at the back line yesterday and I thought, albeit maybe Varane could have done a little bit better for the 2 goals, but it wasn't really on him. It was more Fred and Matic, and the midfield just wilted more so. I didn't think the back line did that bad of a job yesterday. Victor Lindelof got a 6. He just has this kind of laid back kind of way about him, doesn't it? That just never looks out of place. And Busby Babes agreed with me on that one. Rafael Varane, they gave a 5. Again, I thought a little bit harsh. You know what I mean? They're saying he could have done better for the 2 goals. I don't know how much more he could have done better. I mean, the ball coming in for Coutinho's goal needs to be stopped. Can't be really laid at Varane's feet, really. And the other one was really like, it came through Fred and Matic before it got to Varane. So I don't know. Again, harsh. Alex Telles got a 7, which I kind of agreed with. I thought he was very dynamic in the first half, but I thought in the second half he was ineffective because he got pegged back, like the whole team did once they kind of wilted in the midfield. And that's when Ralph Ranik should be making his changes. Matic got a 5. His legs are gone, basically. Basically ran the game for 35 minutes, but then was done, and should have been taken off in the second half. And I kind of agreed with the Busby Babes on that one. Fred got a 5. Again, Fred is really just a conundrum, isn't it? Like, you either love Fred or you hate Fred. He either does what you want or he doesn't do what you want. There's no denying his work rate. He absolutely runs his guts out for the team. But the problem with Fred is you can be putting in that amount of work rate, but how effective is it? In reality, how effective is it? Bruno Fernandes, they give an 8 to. He's always a favourite, but this is probably one of his better performances, and he did step up as captain with the armband on him. Took his 2 goals really, really well. Especially the second one right into the roof, and that was great movement into the box. Second one was more about Martinez's error, but he did rifle in the shot, and Cavani did have a part to play in it in terms of distracting the keeper, even though he was onside. But he was very, I suppose with Bruno, it's very frustrating, isn't it? Because he falls on his arse a lot. He goes down like he's trying to win an Oscar. He's trying to play up and convince referees, and he's developing a bit of an attitude for this. You know what I mean? There's a bit of play acting going on there with him at times, and his referees are going to buy into that, and they're eventually not going to start giving him the decisions that he wants. But he gets a bit petulant and he gets a bit frustrated, And again, yesterday would have been a very frustrating day for him again, because he operates at a certain level that certain players around him aren't operating at. So it's very frustrating for him. Mason Greenwood, they gave a 4, which I thought was, you know, um, I don't know. I just think with Mason, it's a conundrum as well because there's such an expectation of this kid. Yet United for the last 3 years have kind of stymied his development. And I just don't know. At times he makes some poor decisions. At times he has some opportunities. Sometimes he shoots when he shouldn't. Sometimes he doesn't shoot when he should. And he just seems to be, there's a little bit of an imbalance there in his thinking in game moments. But he's a wonderful talent with a great eye for goal. But he just seems out of sorts at the moment. And I don't know, is it the Ronaldo and Cavani effect in there? Some players would be around them and training all week and would step up and become much better players. Some players are around them and just the wave of it and the expectation is just too much. So I'm not too sure what it is with Mason. But again, I think a 4 is like, it's tough going. Cavani got a 4, which I thought was really harsh. There's an expectation on Cavani because he's such a wonderful player, but he's a box player. He's a poacher and he's a box player and has great movement. And if you sling the right balls into the box, more often than not, he'll get on the end of them. But he literally yesterday had no service at all. And you can't really pin that on Cavani because he's one of those guys where he's not going to create his own stuff. He's a guy who gets on the end of a ball and scores goals, puts them in the back of the net. He's not going to be the guy that picks up the ball, beats 3 players, and buries a ball from 15 yards out into the back of the net. The ball has to be precise and pinpoint onto him. That's what his movement is about. So I thought a 4 was harsh from the Busby Babes there. Elanga got an 8, and I think rightly so. I thought he was energetic. I thought he was brilliant in the first half. I thought he stepped up. It was a tough fixture to come into as well, especially on the back of the FA Cup fixture, where there was a little bit of needle in it and stuff like that. And again, United, even in that, were lucky to go through. Villa did have their chances, but just didn't have that end product on the day. But I thought he really stepped up. I thought he gave Matty Cash a thorough time. I thought his link-up play with Tellez was really good. And I think he is really one guy who they should be really looking at develop. He's a decent kid. He's a decent build on him. He's ready to go. Don't hold him back. Don't do what you do with these other players. Put him in there. Put him in there against Brentford, In terms of the subs, there was no real, there's no real rating on them. Sancho came on, didn't really affect the game. Donny van de Beek, no minutes at all. Again, just at this stage, I just think they're totally taking the piss out of Donny van de Beek. And I think he should just turn around to the manager and go, listen, just don't bring me on because you're just making a show me. This guy needs a move away. Clearly, United don't want him. And they're just taking the piss out by giving him a minute or two at the end of every game. It's a load of crap. And they're really stifling his career. This guy was a wonderful player at Ajax. He nearly brought Ajax to a Champions League final. Goes to United, and again, career wreck. We've seen it over the last 8 or 9 years. Wonderful players going to United and just get destroyed. Ralph Ranik, they gave a 6. I think on this one, I think this 6, I think, is really generous. The flip side of what we've seen with the players, because I think his in-game management and his naivety is absolutely horrific. I think he should have made substitutions at really key times when he's seen his midfield wilt a little bit, but he didn't react to it. And he was, partly to blame on this. He's seen Coutinho coming on. He knew what Coutinho was about. Everyone knows what Coutinho was about. He was going to lift the Villa side and give them a massive lift. He should have been making substitutions at that time to shore everything up. Game management, cut it out, cut the snake's head off. Don't give Coutinho that platform to look the way he looked. And he didn't do it. And it's a real problem, you know what I mean? It's for him. We've seen it time and time again. And now the worry for United fans is that the Brentford game comes in and Ronaldo's back and Rashford's back and Maguire's back and they revert back to norm. And the players who have been doing okay, trying to fit into a system, the Elangas again will end up on the bench after putting in a decent performance. The captaincy will come off Bruno after putting in a decent performance. Either Lindelof or Varane will come out of the team and make way for Maguire, and United will be back to square one again. The system is taken apart. Nothing is given time to bed in. No one is given an opportunity. and you're off at it again. And look, don't be surprised either on Tuesday or Wednesday night when they play Brentford, whenever it is, that Brentford don't grind out a draw as well, because this has been the story of United's season. Well, anyway, this has been your match reaction and player ratings for Aston Villa 2, Man United 2. Poor result for United in the end, 20 minutes away from securing 3 points away from home, in a huge match, which would have had huge significance in the top 4 race. Uphill from them now. Let us know in the comments what you think, what your player ratings were like, what you thought of the overall game. Also, if you want to hit us up, we're on Twitter at _upper_tier. We're also on Gmail, the Upper Tier Podcast, and you'll also get us out there on Facebook and Instagram, the Upper Tier. And we will talk to you again real soon.